welcome everyone to this Thursday night talk at Mountain Cloud. Welcome on the mountain. Welcome in the cloud. Wherever you are, one here, one Sangha in this zendo without walls. Last week, David Loy offered our Thursday evening talk. As you heard, David will be here starting May 1st for a month-long residency. Really looking forward to that. But his talk last week spoke to the question, what is the meaning of life? We got a taste of the scope and direction of David's forthcoming book, which is called Loving the World as Our Own Body. Of course, the practical implications of that are profound. Loving the world as my own body. We can also hear in this phrase the invitation to awaken, to wake up to what this body really is. To awaken and turn to the world, the whole world, with love that does not stop. So for tonight, I'd like to turn to a koan. That's a pointer to what this whole world is, and therein to that reality of what we truly are. But first, a poem that resurfaced recently. This is by David Hinton from his collection called Desert Poems. They don't have titles, so just dive in. I have wanted what I have wanted of life. And perhaps I have wanted too much. But today, lungs winged, blue with sky, breath after breath, I think only of sky and remember only sky. And it feels like enough, like everything sky ever wanted. So vividly remember sitting here with David earlier in the year. Nice to feel his presence again. Like everything sky ever wanted. Reading this poem, I recalled our Sambo Zen abbot, Ryon Roshi, saying about our life, about our nature. No separation, no exception. So here is the koan. This is case 100 in the Book of Equanimity, or Shoyoroku, the last case. It's called Roya's Mountains and Rivers. The case. A monk asked Master Kaku of Roya, "The essential state is pure and clear. How are mountains, rivers, and the great wide earth produced at once?" Kaku said, the essential state is pure and clear. How are mountains, rivers, and the great wide earth produced at once? That's it. Two weeks ago on our Thursday night, we took up another case in this collection, this Book of Equanimity, called Hogan's Boat or Land. That case is an exchange between this great Master Hogan and senior monk Kaku, thought to be the same Kaku who appears in this case as a master in this case 100. So as a reminder, and maybe just to savor the beauty in that simple exchange, here is the kernel of that meeting of Hogan and Kaku. It goes like this. Hogan asked senior monk Kaku, "Did you come by boat or by land?" Kaku said, "By boat." Hogan said, "Where is the boat?" Kaku said, "The boat is on the river." Taste this, and you can see that Kaku has crossed over without going anywhere. And now he shows up in this final case of the Book of Equanimity. A monk comes to Kaku, Master Kaku, quoting a line from a famous sutra. The essential state is pure and clear. How are mountains, rivers, and the great wide earth produced at once? This monk is quoting, and he's also asking. He has heard, surely, that the fundamental reality of this whole world is completely empty. Not a speck. How is it then that all these myriad things appear, come forth? How is there anything at all? How does that happen? Emptiness and form. Form and emptiness. Not even room for a hyphen or a conjunction. The monk could be asking, what is this? What am I? And Kaku responds, that turn, showing exactly what this is and how it is, how it arises, how it appears. The essential state is pure and clear. How are mountains, rivers, and the great wide earth produced at once? Clearly, it's not an explanation. Each sound is producing this empty, infinite world. The essential state. Each sound, pure and clear, and right there, mountains, rivers, whole earth, the floor, the altar, the flowers, the candle, the sky. Each one sitting here. it's not really a matter of understanding, just sort of leaving ourselves open to it. The possibility that there is no other emptiness than this. So how can we see it? Well, this is actually how. Last weekend, several Mountain Cloud staff followed David Loy to a small retreat house in the northern New Mexico mountains for a weekend of practice and community building. A beautiful location, perched on a ridge looking out onto a vast mountain range in the distance. Panoramic. I can say distant to try to convey this scene, but one of the clear characteristics of this oneness world, the one body, is no near or far. No distance at all. It's not even as though you could reach out and touch it, but those mountains are just right here. We arrived Friday, kind of midday, and soon thereafter it started to snow. I think it snowed here too, just there. It snowed through the afternoon, through the night, into the next day, until we were blanketed by more than a foot of snowed-in silence. Sky and earth, one color, that no color at all. We started to sit, and this sense of one all-pervading boundlessness just settled in, like that snow. The word that came for me was benevolence. This one benevolence, somehow, just through it all. Over the course of the next couple days of practice, deep into sitting, every now and then a question would just float up. A kind of a concern, The earth, this administration, I can't even remember what they all were. And then, just as momentarily as the question would kind of come, it would be sort of absorbed or dissolved in this benevolence. They just didn't hold up. And then at one point, kind of deeper in, a phrase floated up. I'm just talking about my experience, pretty still, but just at one point, we are so safe. Not dismissing anything. This troubled world, we are so safe. The essential state is pure and clear. How are mountains, rivers, and the great earth produced at once? Among the many koans in even our Sambo Zen, what we call the koan curriculum, all these collections. Many of them end with a confirmation, something like the monk attained great realization. Not so with this case. We don't know if the monk who comes asking had eyes to see that empty oneness world that Kaku presents as the monk's most intimate world, his own essential state. Instead, the collection ends with the whole world simply appearing. Mountains, rivers, great earth. Calls to mind the trigger for Yamada Konroshi's great awakening. If you've read The Three Pillars of Zen, you've read this. But he's riding home one day on the train after work, reading, and he comes across this line from Dogen. Dogen's version, actually, of this line from the sutra. I came to realize clearly that the mind is no other than mountains, rivers, the great wide earth, the sun, the moon, and the stars. This mind is that. We say your own true self, your whole body. And right there also, Shakyamuni Buddha appearing. Joshu, Bodhidharma, Dogen, each one sitting here. This borderless room. Earlier in the week, Abby kindly asked me to give this talk a title. And as it happens with the talk hardly in sight, I offered a title springing from this past weekend's experience. The Benevolence of Awakening. On the way, and already so. We are the monk in this case, asking, seeking, drinking from the wellspring of tradition, even as we find our way exactly where we are. And we are Kaku, giving rise to the essential state in every word, every breath, every step, is and is not without the slightest gap. There's a line from Ikkyu, the great Japanese poet. He wrote, if the bottom is broken through, is and is not disappear. So again comes the question, how can we see it? Be it. Be what we are. So I thought it might be nice to just look at some examples, maybe inviting us to see and lighting the way. And just as a caveat, these kind of came tumbling in. There are countless accounts. And it can really be, kind of inspiring to hear them or read them, but not in the sense of that's how it has to be. There's great variety, and you never know. So just first this brief excerpt from Mumon's commentary on Mu, the koan Mu, from This is David Hinton's translation. Momon writes, "But let all the delusions of a lifetime go, all the understanding and insight, and slowly, little by little, nurture the simplicity of occurrence appearing of itself. Soon, inner and outer are a single tissue." He's describing our practice. A single tissue, by its nature, empty of any fixity, of anything. In his Wisdom Wednesday offering last night, Will read a stanza from a famous verse by Sekito or Shirto, his song of the grass roof hermitage. According to the record, the trigger for Sekito's Great Awakening was when he read a passage from a sutra. The passage said, "Only those can be called holy who view the world in such a way that they see themselves in all things." Sekito Shirto suddenly saw this all the way through. He cried out, "Only those are holy who have no selves, for everything is their self. Who then can speak of you and me, of one's self and another's self?" Just fell open, borderless. Putting this together, I recalled this little verse that dear friend Migaku Sato Roshi wrote for me, just a little card years ago. And it's Japanese, but then the translation was, "In nothing at allness, in nothing at allness exists endlessly everything." The sixth Chinese ancestor, Huineng, heard his master read a line from the Diamond Sutra, this famous line, "Dwelling nowhere, mind comes forth." Huineng, on hearing this, awakened, the record says, and called out, "Master, how could I have guessed that my own nature was already empty? How could I have guessed that my own nature was already beyond birth and death? How could I have guessed that my own nature was already complete and whole? How could I have guessed that my own nature was already unshakable? How could I have guessed that my own nature could be all things?" But there it is. Another record that I so enjoy is from Chiyono, who's a woman, 13th century Japanese, impoverished, ends up working as a servant at a monastery, and finally is allowed to sit with the nuns. The record says, after a period of wholehearted practice, she went out on a full moon night to draw water. That was her job every morning and every night. So she goes out one night, and she's got this bamboo bucket that over the years she has patched together over and over again. She goes out on a full moon night to draw water. The bottom of her old bucket, held together by bamboo strips, suddenly gave way, and the reflection of the moon vanished with the water. she. She writes this poem. With this and that, I tried to keep the bucket together, and then the bottom fell out. Where water does not collect, the moon does not dwell. Some 500 years later, Chiyo-ni, this was Chiyo-no, Chiyo-ni, a haiku master, lay practitioner, then a nun and a poet, wrote this haiku. Clear water, no front, no back. So clear. And yet wet. Some 200 years on, in 1982, Alice Walker wrote an awakening experience in her, that renowned book that's made up of these letters, letters to God, called The Color Purple. I remember this vividly because in my late 20s, a long time ago, I had a very serious illness, life-threatening. And I was in the hospital in the course of that really year. But I was hospitalized for 3 months. And incredibly supported. But every evening, my father would come from the university where he worked, and my parents would be in the room with me, and they would read. And my father read The Color Purple out loud to me. So here's a very short excerpt. And it's in the dialect that I won't try to, I'll just read it. One day, when I was sitting quiet and feeling like a motherless child, which I was, it come to me. That feeling of being part of everything, not separate at all. I knew that if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed. And I laughed, and I cried, and I run all around the house. I knew just what it was. In fact, when it happened, you can't miss it. I've heard students say this sometimes after many years of practice. It's so obvious. And then Mumon writes in one verse, just because it is so clear, it takes us longer to realize it. Some 2 decades before The Color Purple was published, Elaine McGinnis Roshi began Zen practice in Japan, Catholic sister. She started out living and practicing for 8 years at a very rigorous Rinzai convent. And then, with the help of some guidance, she moved to Kamakura to study with Yamada Kon Roshi. And one Rohatsu Sesshin, she has this powerful opening experience. Later, she wrote this book, Light Sitting in Light, her description of that. Just share a little bit of it. Kon Roshi, himself a devout Buddhist, threw open the doors of Zen to people from all religious orientations or none. And so Elaine was coming to Doksan with him and very ripe with this mu koan, deep into it. And one Doksan, instead of saying, what is mu? He asked her, where is God? And, her tradition was, well, God is in my heart. And he just looked at her and said, I'll bet God's in your little finger, and rang the bell. Isn't God there? And she left there a little unsettled because this was, her training, her experience, her orientation. What is that? And then she writes that there was, Father LaSalle was there, this wonderful mentor to her, and she was given the opportunity to speak to him, and he helped her just not be too unsettled and to get back on track. And then she said, in the early evening of the 6th of December, as the stars began to come out, that heart spot burst open, and its beautiful contents exploded right through the whole of me until there was no Elaine left. She quotes that phrase, and now my joy is complete. On the heels of that, I'd like to share one more. This is, some of you will know, this familiar book, wonderful little book by Soko Morinaga Roshi, called Novice to Master: The Extent of My Own Stupidity. It's wonderful. And he's a young monk. He's had a lot of life experience already. And it's a rigorous schedule, and he's sitting one night deep into that and just utterly exhausted. The hours, the schedule was incredible. And as a kind of a novice monk, even at the end of the day, they were expected to go back into the zendo or go outside and keep sitting. He writes, the extremes of fatigue and anguish did not give way to death, but evolved quite contrary to expectations into a curve that led right back to where I had started out. One night I sat in the middle of the night, a lump of fatigue sitting on a zazen cushion. Both body and consciousness were in a haze, and I could not have roused the desire for awakening if I had wanted to, when suddenly the fog cleared and a world of lucidity opened itself. Clearly seeing, clearly hearing, it was yet a world in which there was no me. He goes on, I can't fully explain that time. To venture an explanation would be to err somewhere. The one thing I am sure of is that in this instant, the functioning of the heart with which I was born came into play in its purest form. He runs off, tells his master. It's a beautiful story. He says that this practice is ongoing. It's not just a matter of the sayings of the old masters, but the living koan of human life that continues without limit. When you have sought and finally exhausted all seeking, you become aware of that with which you have been from the beginning, before ever beginning to search, abundantly blessed. After you have ceaselessly knocked and knocked, you realize that the door was standing wide open even before you ever started pounding away. That's what practice is all about. I could do this all night, so let's leave it to this final word. the essential state is pure and clear. How are mountains, rivers, and the great earth produced at once? On the way, and already so. Thank you for this shared practice.